Guys, after what feels like an actual eternity, a lot of drama online around these F1 regulations, some changes made by the FIA, we are back. It's the Miami Grand Prix weekend. I cannot wait. Let's go ahead. Without further ado, I want to jump straight on into this. I honestly kind of want to just jump right into it, but before we do, if you are interested in joining our Community Predictions Championship, you can join the Discord down below. Every week leading up to a Grand Prix, I'll make a call for these exact same predictions, and you'll be able to prove your wheel knowledge against everyone involved. And then when it's all said and done, when the season is over, we will crown a champion. And while I may be the reigning champion of our community, I am not letting up. So if you think you know more wheel than me, head to the Discord down below and get in on the action, because we'd love to have you. Without further ado, our first predictions in literally weeks and weeks and weeks. We're kicking it off with our biggest positive surprise. And this week, I'm going with this season so far, you know, always a bridesmaid, never a bride. We are going with Nico Hülkenberg this week. And this, I think, is because we have seen decent pace out of that Audi. We've seen a lot of instances of, Gabriel Bortoleto making it into Q3. Obviously, he is also finished in the points already this season. Nico has finished P11, I believe, more than any other driver so far in this 3-round season we've had so far, which I think is saying a lot. I think it's Nico Hülkenberg's time to shine. I think we see Nico Hülkenberg in the points at some point this weekend, getting himself on the board. And I think this actually isn't even that crazy an idea. Audi have shown themselves to be a bit of a glass cannon when it comes to pace. If you saw my one thing for every F1 team video I put up last week, then you'll know that my one thing for Audi was that they seem to have pace, but at the same time feel very fragile at the same time. If they could sort of strike that balance, I think we could see decent things from Audi. They really are trying to carry over the momentum from Sauber last season. And so far, I think it's been an okay job. These new regulations obviously are a lot to get a handle on. But at the end of the day, I think Nico Hülkenberg gets himself into the points this weekend and shows that he's still got it. So looking forward to that. All right, let's move on now to our pick for biggest disappointment in Miami. And this is actually kind of going with the exact opposite of Nico Hülkenberg in some sort of way. Is a guy who has had an unbelievable start to the season, but I struggle to believe that he'll be able to keep it up long term. I'm going with Pierre Gasly this week. It feels like one of those moments where he has been absolutely lights out to start the season. And if we had Bahrain and Jeddah, I actually think there's a good chance that Pierre Gasly is not obviously challenging for the championship, but very clearly separating himself from, the midfield in terms of the driver standings. But this was a multi-week break where you really don't know what's going to happen. You have all of the changes coming in from the FIA regarding, recharge, deployment limits, et cetera, all that stuff. I'm not smart enough to pretend to know what that's really going to do to the grid. But at the same time, it's like that combined with the break, combined with it being a sprint weekend, combined with, facing another 3-week break after that. It's just the right spot for a little bit of weirdness, and I think we'll see Pierre potentially have his first speed bump of the season. What that realistically looks like, it's hard to say, because, he has been banging on the door of the top 5 more races than not, and so it's tough to say that, he has to finish outside the points, but I think we could just see a weekend where maybe he's just a little more on the back foot. No, I'm going to call my shot. Pierre Gasly, not in the points in the Grand Prix. And I am expecting a bit of a step back from Pierre. Maybe more so just I'm expecting other guys to then show up again. Think Red Bull, think Ollie Behrman, that kind of stuff. They'll be there right there for the battle. So who knows? But regardless, Pierre Gasly, my pick for biggest disappointment. All right, moving on to qualifying for the race on Sunday. It is a sprint weekend, but this is for the Grand Prix qualifying. Let's go ahead, get this party started in P3. I'm going with Oscar Piastri this week. Obviously coming out of basically his season start in Japan. And even though it was a handful of weeks ago, I think Oscar has shown that he has an ability with this car that he obviously did not get a chance to show off in China or in Australia. And so he showed up in Japan, probably should have won the race. And I think we're going to see a new Oscar Piastri starting now, because boy, oh boy, did he come out on fire in Japan. And I'm sure he's going to be itching for nothing more than to continue that momentum coming into the United States and heading to Miami. So Oscar Piastri, my official pick for P3 in qualifying. We're leaving only P2 in pole position ahead. P2, I am going with George Russell in this one. Obviously, Mercedes. Obviously, George Russell going to be here one spot or another. At the same time, George, decent, pretty good in qualifying. I don't think we've seen him really dominate qualifying like many of us might have expected to start the season. But at the same time, obviously, more than good enough. We've seen him be able to do it under pressure. We've seen him do it consistently. I don't think there's anything to really mention here. We're very quickly reaching instances of I have to see it before I believe it type of situation. And so George Russell, P2, and that leaves only pole position Kimi Antonelli, who actually has taken a pole position in Miami before. That's what I went for here. He's obviously carrying a lot of momentum following China and then into Japan. Can he keep it up? Time will tell, but I do think he'll be good enough on Saturday to take pole position here in Miami and start on the front row of the grid. But will it be enough? Time will tell. We'll get to that here in a minute. But there we go, a top three in qualifying of Oscar Piastri, P3, George Russell, P2, Kimi Antonelli on pole position. All right, mentioned it already. It is a sprint weekend, and we have to make a prediction for sprint winner. There really isn't a whole lot to beat around the bush here. I'm going with George Russell, getting a bit off the snide here coming into Miami. Obviously, back-to-back, not winning a race after winning Australia pretty comfortably. Must have been feeling pretty good. I believe he also won the sprint in China. And so going win in Australia, win in the sprint in China, but then to go back-to-back L's against your sophomore teammate who now leads the championship. I'm sure he's going to want to come out on fire, and I think it is going to happen here in Miami. I think he'll come out with a sprint win and try and carry a lot of momentum into Sunday. Time will tell if he can do that, but I think it's going to be one of these instances where I think George might just win out over Kimi Antonelli, especially with such a short run down into turn one. Time will tell. We'll have to see what happens, but at the end of the day, George Russell, you're my pick for sprint winner. Let's go ahead and move on forward to our race podium. This is going to be our final podium for another 3 weeks before Canada. And so we are going to have to savor this every single moment. And did that mean I got a little crazy? Potentially. Am I going to regret it? Potentially. But where else can we start besides P3? And I'm going with Charles Leclerc this week in P3. I think this is going to be an instance of Charles wanting to, get back up off the mat a little bit. Don't know. It's really interesting with the Ferrari versus McLaren battle. Obviously, Ferrari have sort of taken sort of the headline, that secondary headline, under Mercedes with McLaren's issues to start the season. Obviously, Oscar Piastri crashing out in Australia before the race even began, and then to a double DNS in China. Ferrari is sort of taking that spotlight. But insert Japan, where you have Oscar Piastri absolutely running away with the show, and Lando Norris pretty competitive as well with Ferrari. And so it might be a lot closer for that P2 spot, and it's going to get very uncomfortable potentially. But at the end of the day, I think this is an instance where Charles might just have what it takes in Miami. He's had decent results here before, and I think we'll see it once again. So P3, Charles Leclerc. As we move on now to P2 in my race podium, and I'm going with Oscar Piastri. This is going to be a back-to-back P2 for Oscar Piastri, in my opinion. I think Oscar, based on what I saw in Japan, looked like a man possessed. I'll be very curious to see if he can keep it up. But at the same time, we saw last season that Oscar really enjoyed being, in that first half of the season. And I think we are seeing something very similar here. Will it be enough to take a win? Who knows? But I do think he'll be more than good enough to finish P2. And last but not least, my winner for the 2026 Miami Grand Prix is George Russell. This one I am banking entirely on the race start. It will take some chaos. It will take some moments, and it's going to get very interesting, especially with the changes that the FIA are making when it comes to race starts. We've seen Kimi Antonelli be extremely vulnerable in race starts. Japan might be the best example of that. And not only that, he's had issues with starts and basically every other weekend as well. So this, especially with such a short run down to T1 in Miami, it could get a little troublesome if he has another one of those moments. Now the new FIA regulations are going to address these, mixed power levels situation thing on the race starts, and the car is going to be able to emergency deploy whatever with this, that, the other thing. Who knows what that's going to look like? They're literally just testing it in Miami. So at this point, I can only go based on what I've seen in the past. And Kimi Antonelli has been extremely vulnerable in race starts. And is Miami the type of track that you realistically can charge back through the field on? I'm not sure, especially when we've seen both Ferrari and McLaren be able to hold off a charging Mercedes like we saw in Japan, as well as back in China as well. So time will tell to see what happens, but I am banking on some chaos and a very interesting exit to the Miami Grand Prix into another 3-week break. So there we have it. We have a Charles Leclerc P3, a Oscar Piastri P2, and a George Russell win. Last but certainly not least, we have our one crazy prediction. We always end on a little bit of craziness, and I think this one is probably pretty crazy. I don't realistically know if it would be too surprising, but at the end of the day, we are here to make some bold statements, and my bold statement for the 2026 Miami Grand Prix is that at least one Ferrari finishes behind a Haas car in the Grand Prix. Now, the astute of you will have noticed that just now in my podium predictions, I did indeed put Charles Leclerc on the podium. And you'll also notice that I did not mention Haas anywhere else in this prediction, and as a Haas fan, I have to include them somewhere. It's like a moral obligation almost. And so the astute of you will show that I could just say I'm predicting that Lewis Hamilton will finish behind either Esteban Ocon or Ollie Behrman. I'm leaving it up a bit more to interpretation. We are spreading our eggs a little bit more than potentially we could. And so my one crazy prediction is that a customer team with a Ferrari-powered engine in the Haas F1 team finish ahead of at least one Scuderia Ferrari in the Grand Prix. Is this crazy? Am I just delusional? Time will tell. And guys, there we have it, our first predictions in far too many weeks, and it will be actually our last prediction for, once again, far too many weeks. I hope you enjoyed it. If you made it this far, I truly appreciate you. Leave a like on the video as it really helps me out. And if you haven't already, subscribe down below. Join our little community and get in on the action. We will be back when the weekend is all said and done to talk about every single thing that we saw happen, as well as take a look at these predictions and see just how much wheel I was able to cook up in a way too long of a break before this weekend. So I, for one, am really looking forward to it. I hope you are as well. We'll be back when it's all said and done. But until then, guys, I'll see you in the next one.